morning for science class where we had questions and that was super fun. Thank you for those of you who could make it. So we're continuing on with Overboard. So remember that are back at the hospital and little Ravina, the girl who had appendicitis, is having cardiac arrest, which is a heart attack. Then the girl was in cardiac arrest. Between busy adults, Emily could see the girl's sheet pulled away, well away to reveal her bony chest. The oxygen mask flew to the floor. James's face and body were hidden from Emily's view behind the nurse, but Emily saw his big hands clasped together, palms down, beginning to press quickly on her chest. The depressions he made were so deep, it looked as though he might crush her chest, snapping those fragile ribs. After every fifth depression, Olivia put her mouth over the little girl's mouth and blew. It went on forever. The small woman in the sarong stood with her head buried in her husband's chest. The husband stood watching, still as a statue, as if invisible hands held him tight, forcing him to look. The old man rocked gently on his mat. Emily didn't know what to do, so she sat in a chair by the wall and hugged her knees to her chest. An hour later, James and Olivia gave up. They recorded the time, and James turned to talk to the parents. Olivia carefully wrapped the girl in a white sheet so that she looked almost like a swaddled baby. She stood looking down at Rabina, with her hand resting slightly on the girl's shoulder. She reached out with one hand and gently tucked away a wayward strand of Rabina's hair behind her ear. The old man came out of his trance, put out the incense, and rolled up his mat. He bowed deeply to Rabina's parents and then offered his right hand, Western style, to James. James shook it and bowed his head slightly. Then the old man left. Ooh, Memphis sees somebody walking, I think. She's pretty much an alarm for anybody who's outside. Hey. All at once, Emily noticed that there were children crying in the beds around her. She put her legs down and sat up straight, dazed. Rabina's mother opened her little girl's swaddling sheet and folded it around her again so that her face was covered. Rabina's father lifted his daughter, light as a feather, as if he were carrying a toddler, and they left. Olivia followed behind them. The day nurse arrived and began morning rounds. James walked over to Emily. "I'm so sorry the other children saw that," he said in a low voice, patting Emily's back. "What could I have done?" Emily asked defensively. "It's not your fault. We didn't have time to move her to a separate room." He stood thinking, pushing up his glasses with his finger. "I suppose you could have gotten the screen we use for privacy when a patient is bathing." "Nobody asked me to get the screen," Emily said, panicked. "I was trying to stay out of the way." "I know. It's just an afterthought. There's no reason we can't learn from this." "It seemed bad enough to me that the old Duncan was in the way. I didn't want to make matters worse." "The Duncan was not in the way, Em," James said. "He was in the way. If that had been me, you would have yelled at me to get out of the way." She was flushed red in the face. She couldn't stop herself. "How could you let him sit uselessly in the way? No, he was even worse than useless. He's the reason she was so sick." James crossed his arms and spoke with thin lips. "Emily, many families can't afford to travel to hospitals, so they trust the folk remedies. They have to. The medicine of a good Dukin is often very appropriate." "How can you say that? You're a real doctor. How can you say that now that Robina is—" She couldn't bring herself to say it. Her throat burned. She bit her lip. "Rubina's parents needed him there," James said with finality. "They needed us, but they also needed him. Someday, I hope you'll understand." Emily couldn't speak. Couldn't think. "We have work to do," James said, and then softly, "Please, Em, can you just get to work?" Emily swallowed hard. "I'm sorry about the phone," she croaked. "What?" She cleared her throat. "The phone. I'm sorry that I misplaced it." She looked over at Rubina's empty cot. All that was left was the debris from trying to save her life. Who knows what James and Olivia could have done with those extra 20 minutes after the clinic paged them? Was it actually Emily's fault that Rubina was dead? Her eyes filled with hot tears. Without knowing where she was going, she turned and stumbled out the door. She thought she heard her mother call to her. Around the corner and a block down, she ran past the mosque. High up in the minaret, singing in Arabic, a muezzin chanted the noon call to prayer. He had a rich, plaintive voice that seemed to fall on her like a blanket. Emily covered her ears. A bima was parked just past the mosque. A handwritten sign in the window of the van read, Kruing Raya, and then in parentheses in English, harbor. Chapter 5 we'll do tomorrow.